Welcome to another captivating episode of Psych with Sigmund. Today we're going to delve into a fascinating yet complex topic that affects many lives: narcissistic abuse and trauma bonding. This psychological phenomenon is not only intriguing, but also crucial for understanding the intricacies of human relationships and the profound impact they can have on our mental health. Narcissistic abuse refers to a pattern of behavior where an individual, often with narcissistic personality traits, exploits and manipulates others for their own emotional gratification. This can involve emotional, psychological, or even physical abuse, leaving the victim feeling drained, confused, and helpless. Trauma bonding, on the other hand, is the strong emotional connection that can develop between the abuser and the victim, making it difficult for the victim to leave the relationship. The concept of narcissistic abuse and trauma bonding has its roots in psychological theory, particularly in the areas of attachment, trauma, and interpersonal relationships. The term trauma bonding was first introduced by psychologist Patrick Carnes in the 1980s, who described it as a phenomenon where individuals form strong emotional bonds with their abusers as a way to cope with the trauma they're experiencing. One of the key psychological theories that explains narcissistic abuse and trauma bonding is attachment theory. According to attachment theory, our early relationships with caregivers shape our expectations and behaviors in future relationships. When we experience neglect, abuse, or inconsistent caregiving, it can lead to insecure attachment patterns, making us more vulnerable to narcissistic abuse. Research has shown that individuals with insecure attachment styles, such as anxious, preoccupied, or dismissive avoidant, are more likely to engage in trauma bonding. For example, a study published in the Journal of Trauma and Stress found that individuals with anxious, preoccupied attachment styles were more likely to experience trauma bonding in abusive relationships. Another important factor in understanding narcissistic abuse and trauma bonding is the concept of emotional regulation. When we're in a state of hyperarousal or hypervigilance, our brains can become overwhelmed, leading to emotional dysregulation. This can cause us to seek comfort and validation from our abusers, even if it means tolerating abusive behavior. A classic example of this is the case of Stockholm Syndrome, where hostages develop a strong emotional bond with their captors as a way to cope with the trauma they're experiencing. In one notable case, a bank robbery hostage named Kristen Enmark formed a close relationship with her captor, Jean-Eric Olsen, and even defended him in court after the ordeal. Our understanding of narcissistic abuse and trauma bonding has evolved significantly over time, thanks to advances in neuroimaging and psychology research. For instance, studies using functional magnetic resonance imaging (fMRI) have shown that individuals who experience trauma bonding exhibit altered brain activity patterns in regions related to emotional regulation, such as the amygdala and prefrontal cortex. In terms of real-world applications, understanding narcissistic abuse and trauma bonding can help people recognize the warning signs of abusive relationships and seek help. Therapeutic approaches like trauma-informed care, cognitive behavioral therapy, CBT, and dialectical behavior therapy, DBT, have shown promise in helping individuals break free from trauma bonds and rebuild their sense of self-worth. For example, a client I worked with who had been in an abusive relationship for several years began to recognize the patterns of narcissistic abuse and trauma bonding. Through therapy, she learned to identify her emotional triggers, develop healthier coping mechanisms, and eventually left the relationship. It's essential to note that narcissistic abuse and trauma bonding can affect anyone, regardless of their background or demographics. However, certain groups, such as women, children, and marginalized communities, may be more vulnerable due to societal and systemic factors. In conclusion, narcissistic abuse and trauma bonding are complex psychological phenomena that underscore the resilience and vulnerability of the human spirit. By acknowledging these patterns and seeking help, we can develop empathy for those trapped in such cycles and support their journey towards healing. As we navigate our relationships and personal growth, recognizing these dynamics can be a powerful tool for fostering healthier connections and seeking help when needed. Remember, the journey to understanding and overcoming narcissistic abuse is not about blaming the victim, but about empowering them with knowledge and support. By sharing our stories, raising awareness, and promoting education, we can work towards creating a society that prioritizes emotional safety, respect, and compassion. Remember to like, share, and subscribe, and until next time, may your ego find balance between pleasure and reality.